Welcome to Catch You Outdoors, episode number 10. Going to the movies. Well, sort of. Let's call it movies with a bit or a bunch of fishing embedded somewhere in the plot. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modes. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know that you can contact me via email at catchyoutdoors@gmail.com. Our website is catchyoutdoors.com. There you'll find a list of episodes, both past and future. And yes, there's a Facebook page, Catch You Outdoors. My second book's been released, Bridge to Paradise, a book of short stories about fishing, travel, and life. Thank you, Middle River Press, my publisher. You can purchase it on my website, catchyoutdoors.com. It's also now available on Amazon via print and Kindle. How this came about, I'm sure you're probably wondering. I was wondering. No, seriously, I was going through different subjects, and yeah, this popped into my head thanks to me just sitting around watching television. I was watching A River Runs Through It for about the 500th time, seriously. And I don't know, it's just one of those movies. I get a big kick out of it. It's because of the fly fishing portion of it. The opening of the film is mesmerizing. It's worth watching over and over and over again if you're into that sort of thing. So I was sitting there thinking, there's all these films out there that have fishing as part of them. Some of them directly, like right into it. That's pretty much all they do in the movie. Usually a comedy movie. We'll get into that in a little bit. But there's also all these other films out there that are have chunks of fishing in it, or revolve around fishing, or just have a little piece of it in its plot. And I thought, that's where I'm going to go with this time out and just see what happens. A River Runs Through It was kind of interesting. When it came out, fly fishing was very popular in the upper West, the Pacific West, and also in the upper Midwest, and in the Florida Keys in Florida, bone fishing specifically, and tarpon. But on the Gulf Coast of Florida and East Coast of Florida, there really wasn't a lot going on. You certainly couldn't get a charter back in the 80s. And that changed. I don't want to say you couldn't get one. You might get one. but as time went by, fly fishing became more and more popular. And I think a great deal of it was due to the movie A River Runs Through It. People saw that and went, what a romantic thing. How cool is that? Where do I learn to do that? How do I do it? And if you go back and do a little research, the fishing merchants of the time also agreed. They were like, wow, it really, really put a boost in their business. Orvis in particular made mention of it in several small articles or releases back then about how it really improved their bottom line. It portrays the fly fishing part at the beginning as somewhat mystical, or just for a lack of a better word. And if you watch the opening sequences, you'll clearly understand what I'm talking about. And because of this, watching that's what got me into this whole subject. I thought, there's a whole bunch of movies out there that have fishing in them of some sort, but they don't really push it all the way that A River Runs Through did. River Runs Through It did. So on that note, we'll get back to A River Runs Through It, and we will. I'll talk more about the film and about it in a little bit, actually toward the end of this. But we're going to dive way back first, way back in time, to what I believe are some of the earliest of the what I call fishing, or have a bit of a plot, and that's directly because of the person that wrote the books, Ernest Hemingway. I'm a big fan of Hemingway. I like reading his books. Almost all of them have some sort of fishing in it because he had an extreme passion for it. He spent a great deal of time between Key West and Cuba. And when he wasn't there, he was doing safaris into Africa and other faraway places. But it always seemed to get back to fishing. And there were a few films that I still watch quite often that revolve around his books. They touched a nerve with me because of the way the books were written and the way fishing was described in the books. He's quite detailed, and that's something I really enjoy reading, and also enjoyed watching in the movies or the films that were made of his books. The most obvious to begin with, it would have to be The Old Man and the Sea. Now, if you haven't read the book, read it. It's a little book, not many pages. You can handle it, don't worry. You can probably read it in a day or at least a weekend, depending on the breaks that you take. And it's really, really good. The story itself revolves around an old man who is having a difficult time catching fish. As a matter of fact, he's had 80 something days without a fish. And it's his job to fish. I mean, that's what he does. He sells fish, and he's miserable because of it. The movie, the original movie from 1958, stars Spencer Tracy, and he plays the old man. And he plays it very well, tragically at best. And eventually he decides, he's not going to quit because he's a fisherman. And he gets in the boat and he goes out and he finally hooks a small fish, which is a positive note. And then, of course, he hooks this gigantic marlin. And the battle goes on, 2 or 3 hours, as I remember. And eventually he gets it to the side of his boat, which is not as you and I picture boats, or any of us picture boats today. This is just a rowboat, more or less, with a sail. It actually has a small mast and it's almost like a pram. It's a really little boat. So he ties this thing up to the boat. He's exhausted. He's been fighting the fish for, I believe it was a couple of days before he finally gets it to the boat. And once he does, it gets attacked by sharks. So he's got this beautiful catch. It's towed him out into the ocean. He's got to figure out how to get back to shore. He's trying to keep the sharks off of this thing. And of course, I mean, I don't want to give it all away, but you probably figured this out since it was 1958. Somewhere along the line, you've heard of it, you've seen it, or you read it. But the sharks pretty much eat all of the marlin. But he gets back to land, and the people automatically build him up and help him feel like, you went out and you really did this. You fought this giant fish. You fought off the sharks. You almost won. He brings back the carcass. He brings back the bones. You can tell it's an enormous marlin when it comes back, one of the biggest ever. But what I found interesting about the story is the way it evolves at the end. It's tragic, and you're like, gosh, he did everything he could. He hasn't caught any fish. He finally gets the most beautiful fish on the planet. He finally gets it into the shoreline, or finally gets it to the boat. The sharks eat it up, and he has to come home without it, more or less. But the moral of the story is he never, never, ever gave up. And the people that greet him when he gets back to land are the same way. They're all, "Man, what a magnificent fish that was." And things just go back to normal. He now is considered, his luck is back. The people at the beach are saying, okay, look, you did good. And it's time for you to get back out there and go fishing again. I can identify with this. Thank God I never went 84 days without catching a fish, or 85, or whatever it was. But you can understand his frustration. But at the same time, you have to understand the elation. Fishing is it's a crazy sport, and you can go out there and get skunked over and over again. But the idea is to keep trying until you actually get that fish, and not only that fish, you get that one fish, the one that you've always wanted, the one that you can brag about. So check it out, The Old Man in the Sea. Number 2, another Hemingway. I'm going to do 3 of these. Okay, so hang in there. Islands in the Stream. This one was from 1977. Stars George C. Scott. Ooh, that's a mouthful. George C. Scott. Got it. Um, this is an unusual movie in the fact that the book was published after Hemingway's death. Hemingway had the book fleshed out. He had a lot of it done. But the family, after he passed away, decided to release it, to put it together, to edit it, put it together and edit it. I don't, having read both the book and seen the film, it's kind of haphazard, kind of all over the place. Matter of fact, it's 3 distinct parts. The movie is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but they don't make a whole lot of sense. And I think Hemingway would have, well, if he hadn't, he flipped in his grave when he heard about this. But nevertheless, the movie is interesting. I enjoy watching it. It stars George C. Scott, who is a fantastic actor, was a fantastic actor. Um, in my opinion, the movie's kind of a mess just because of I don't know, just the order of the movie is kind of strange. But let me explain. I like the stories, and there are 3 distinct stories as part of this. Number 1, you have this old man, this guy who is he's a failure. I mean, that's really what it feels like. He's lost 2 wives, he's lost his sons, everybody's left him. All he really does is hang out, fish, and drink. maybe that's not so. I'm just kidding. Not so bad. Anyway, you understand where I'm going. And then, so you live with him in the first part of the movie is just kind of a loser. Things are just not good. And then you get to the middle part of the movie, and the sons show up. His three sons that he hasn't seen in ages. The oldest by his first wife, and his other two boys by the second wife. And he takes them fishing, and he shows them what he's all about and what he does in that respect. And they do respect him. As a matter of fact, the youngest hooks into a gigantic marlin. Does this sound familiar? And fights it until his hands are bloody. He won't let dad help. He won't let the other brothers help. He wants to be the best he can be in front of his father. Kind of tear jerky, kind of sad, but you kind of get it as you watch it. So what happens is he slowly but surely endears himself to his sons, and then they leave. And then part three kicks in, which has almost nothing to do with part one and two. A wife returns. She doesn't really ask for his hand back. She's not hunting for that. She's just trying to connect to him. But there's an underlying plot going on, and I'm not going to tell you what happened because that gives away a chunk of it. It leads to a scene where he rescues folks from persecution via his boat, the Pilar, which is actually in the film. Now, I don't know if it's the original Pilar. I doubt it very seriously because last I heard that was in Cuba. But it's obviously a boat designed to look just like the Pilar, or a mock-up. It's it's just the most bizarre thing, and that's where the story ends. So, yes, it's good to watch. It's interesting. I'm not so sure Hemingway would have ever released the book or the film, for that matter. But it is. I don't know. The scenery in it's really good. I kind of like that, and I like the overall theme of outdoors in it. So, Islands in the Stream, released in 1977. Last of the Hemingway films, and clearly my favorite, To Have and Have Not, which was released in 1944. Um, this is barely a fishing movie. However, it opens with a scene that you have to see if you're into fishing, and certainly for those of us that have spent our time on the water as guides. Um, Almost every fishing guide can identify with this. Um, he has a customer. The customer constantly complains. All he does is he can't couldn't catch fish if he tried, and of course he blames that on the captain. He finally hooks up with one after days of fishing. I think he's booked a week, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to go back and watch again. Um, and he finally hooks this magnificent fish, and he loses the rod, reel, and the fish overboard. Everything just goes. His ineptitude is just huge. And so this guy, he gets upset. He blames it all on the captain. He blames it on the mate. He blames it on everything but himself. And then ultimately, back on land, he doesn't pay. He pays, but it's not any good. And of course, guess who has to go hunting for him? Yeah, you got it. This one stars Humphrey Bogart, and you don't mess with Bogart. So he sets things straight. Now, from that point on, there is some fishing mixed in, and there's a lot of interesting plot going on in To Have and Have Not. It's one of my favorite Humphrey Bogart movies, to be perfectly honest with you. It also introduces Lauren Bacall. It was her first film, and she, besides the fact she's gorgeous and sexy, the chemistry between Humphrey Bogart and her it's unreal. Of course, I mean, let's the old saying, Bowie and Bacall. Yeah, well, there you go. They wind up getting married the very next year, as a matter of fact. She's great in the movie, and the overall, just the interesting plot and the way it all works, and he being a salty captain, just kind of makes the film, and I really enjoy it, and I'd recommend highly watching it. Now, I readily admit I am not a big comedy film watcher. Dramas, action, sci-fi, that's my gig. But the comedies, some of them, sure, but not all. And in fishing, you go in and you look for them. And I did this. I actually searched to see what was out there just out of simple curiosity. I found one that I watched. I watched a big chunk of it. I think I watched the very first part, a little bit of the middle, and the ending. It's called Bait Shop. Um, it's just plain dumb. I don't know any other way to put it, but I wanted to include it because you have to watch it to appreciate the very beginning. The start was interesting. It stars Bill Engvall, who's a comedian. Um, and at the beginning of the movie, without giving too much away, he's fishing and he's overrun by jet skis and a bass dude in a big fast boat. And it's insane. And you watch that and you go, man, I've been in that situation before, and it made me laugh. I have to admit it. But the best part is the bass pro, who is it's funny. He does a funny representation, but it's Billy Ray Cyrus. That's who plays this big bass pro, and he's just annoying. He's a jerk, and the more you watch it, the more you're like, oh, you just want to strangle this guy. That's right, Billy Ray Cyrus, as in Miley Cyrus's father. Achy Breaky Heart, for those of you that remember that song way back when. Yeah, that's what he's responsible for. Anyway, this movie is funny and terrible all at the same time. That's the only way I can put it. Be sure to watch it as long as you don't have to pay for it. I don't want to give it away. It's got a plot mixed in, but anyway, yeah, I just had to throw it in here. Comedy number two. Now, this one I've seen, and this one made me laugh. I give it that. It's called Gone Fishing. It stars Joe Pesci and Danny Glover, and it's downright funny. Of course, it's got Joe Pesci in it, so why wouldn't it be funny? I mean, the guy's hilarious anyway. The antics between the two are great. The chemistry's fantastic. It's about these two guys who have not been out fishing in quite a while, and they get a break from work, and they decide to load up and spend 4 days down in Florida. The filming, which would be interesting to a lot of listeners that are Florida people, uh, took place in Everglades City, Marco Island, Ochopee, and a few shots from New Jersey and South Carolina as well. But most of the movie is shot right in the Everglades area, which makes it interesting. Essentially, two guys get a 4 day break to go fishing, and it gets completely out of control. So I'd recommend it. Yeah, tune it in and be sure to watch this one. And then there is the perfect storm. Oh my. That's another one I've watched more than once. I would say, honestly, 7 or 8 times. Less than 10. This film was released in 2000. It was based on a true book, a true story, which I think what I like best about the movie is the lessons that it teaches. Having been in the Coast Guard and seeing what people are capable of doing that's bad on the water. You get a front row seat for that when you work in the Coast Guard. It's truly amazing how dumb people can be on a boat, but they do it. How many leave the dock without any life jackets? That sort of thing. The thing about the perfect storm was this revolves solidly around fishing, sword fishing in particular. And these guys are ate up by this because it's money, it's big money. And they make all their money during a certain time of the year, a certain portion of the year. And they work very, very hard at this. And it brings together a strange batch of people. The star of this one's George Clooney. His first mate is Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg wants to be a swordfish captain, so he's kind of working with George Clooney to be the best. There are many, many other great actors and actresses in this thing, which is what makes it very watchable. The story is great, and it's even laid out on film really well. It's nerve wracking because you know what's going to happen. I guess that's part of the deal. I read the book, and the book is excellent. The book fills in an awful lot of tidbits that you don't get in the film, which is true for most movies made from books. So I'd recommend that. But The Perfect Storm is, without a doubt, a perfect movie. It really is. It perfectly terrifying. The wave that comes and nails the boat is, whew, you wouldn't want to be there. Let's put it that way. And somehow they were. So I use this one as a lesson on what not to do on the water, and I hope that others do too. I hope you watch it. One thing that I've run into this many, many times in my career as a captain. There are many, many people out there that don't even bother to get a weather report before they leave. They just don't. They'll look at the tides because they know in the world of fishing that tides are important. And they may even look at wind right now, wind, but they don't look at a forecast to see what's going to happen. And I know on the Gulf of Mexico, Atlantic Ocean, Florida Keys, that things can change in a matter of an hour and get very, very nasty very, very fast. And if you're in a small boat, you can get yourself killed. So the perfect storm kind of shows that, and I hope the people that watch that are boaters take that, you know, take that to heart and go, gosh, I don't ever want to be in a situation like that. So pay attention to those forecasts. I'm going to really switch gears on this one, and I'm going to blame this one on my wife, Jonelle. Um, there's this movie called Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, and it has become a favorite of mine. I've watched it twice. I'll probably do it again after doing this podcast because I went back and watched a preview on it to kind of remind me of the pieces that were in it. And it's just a great movie. The story is based mostly on fact, which is kind of interesting. It's about a very wealthy sheik who wants to bring fly fishing to the desert via the Yemen River. Specifically, he wants to fish for salmon, and he wants to introduce salmon to the Yemen River. Yes, he has lots of money and he's determined and he loves fly fishing. And that's where the story goes. Now, I would have never seen this movie in a million years. So I've got to give credit back to Janelle. I tend to watch stuff over again, and I stick, as I said before, adventure type movies, sci-fi, things like that. I treasure hunting, whatever it might be, and I'll watch that whatever movie pertains to that several times. I don't generally wander off the beaten path. Janelle, on the other hand, will scan through all of the movies that are available, Netflix and whatever the case may be, Prime, HBO, all of it, and she'll read the plots, and then she'll pick one. And invariably, I'll be sitting there already. Actually, I'll be on the phone or I'll be reading, and she puts one up, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to watch this. And then the movie goes on, and the next thing you know, I am watching it. And the next thing you know, I'm very, very intrigued by it. She has a real knack for selecting the things that I've missed in the past. That heck, I don't know. It could have been great at the box office for all I know. I don't attend movie theaters either. But it's kind of funny. It's just like this movie comes on, and it's obviously interesting, but the plot's what got me. Yemen with salmon in it, seriously. And I'm not going to give it away, but you have to watch this. It's truly amazing. So basically, salmon fishing in the Yemen. Um, it the plot just sounds like it's never going to work, and all in all, it's great. The characterizations in the movie are terrific. The battle between this scientifically minded young man who is trying to tell this sheik that this is never going to work, and then he gets roped into making sure that it does work, and that's what I really liked about it. Excellent movie and really fun to watch. Jaws. Bet you thought I was going to miss that one. Nope. This will be brief. Um, if there's anybody that hasn't seen Jaws on this planet by now, I'd be absolutely stunned. It's a fishing movie. I mean, let's face it, that's what they do. They go after a shark. And it's without question probably one of the coolest things ever. That movie put the fright in a whole bunch of us. I look over my shoulder whenever I'm diving. I look over my shoulder whenever I'm snorkeling in the crystal clear waters of the Florida Keys. I will not swim in the Gulf waters. The Gulf waters are too murky for me. I don't, even on a good day, I don't, I just, no, I won't do it. And a lot of that has to do with all the sharks that I caught off of the coast of Fort Myers, in the Fort Myers area, in Sanibel, Captiva. There are some really big bull sharks and some really big hammerheads out there. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see a great white cruise by at this point. So, no. But the movie, it does, I mean, it's a fishing movie. Let's face it, there's this giant shark and it's eating people. And a local fisherman is hired, Quint, yeah, I believe that's right. I could be wrong, is hired to head out there and find that shark. It has led to a zillion one-liners that people remember. I think we're going to need a bigger boat, that kind of stuff. And it could be watched again and again. I have to admit, it was one of those films that, once you've seen it, I don't know. And then next thing you know, you find yourself watching it again. It is played over and over on late night television by one network or another, so it's not very hard to find it. But it had to be mentioned here because let's face it, it is probably one of the fishing movies. And now finally back to A River Runs Through It. I mentioned earlier, how it addressed fly fishing and brought fly fishing to the forefront. It has a wealth of great actors and actresses in it. It's put together extremely well, but what I find impressive about it is just the overall scenery, the shots of fly fishing in Montana, and it puts it in a light that makes it really comfortable, like you want to be there and you want to go fishing that way from beginning to end. There's sadness in this thing. I mean, it's about a family. I mean, there's the preacher, his wife, and the two sons. And one of the sons is, gung ho, go to college, let's get this done, let's be a high success. And the other son's not. The other son's very happy to keep on fly fishing. He's asked early on, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, a fisherman, a fly fisherman. So there you go. Um, I enjoy the play between the people, and I enjoy the way the movie's put together, and I enjoy watching the overall scenery. I guess that's what really grabs me about this. I personally love fly fishing. I find it to be relaxing, more or less a mind eraser. It requires a bit more concentration than any other fishing I've done, and so of course it fits me to a T. But I can see where people watched it years ago and started going, man, what is this sport? What is this all about? How do you do this? And how do you actually catch fish with a fly rod and a fly? And that's what a big portion of this movie to me is about. It's also based on a true story. The A River Runs Through It is a book that was written by Norman MacLean, and the character Norman in the book is Norman MacLean. It's about his family. So what happens in this book is very much true, and it shows how addictive that fishing can be, but at the same time how it can take a family and bend it in a lot of different directions. I've watched it many times. I've read the book many times, and in both cases, I get a lot out of it. I really do, and I hope you do too. Okay, that takes care of that. Next week, I am going to put together, I'm going to call it fishing stuff. I thought what I'd do is start putting on the tag into these that I'm working on, what's coming up next week. Fishing stuff, equipment. Yeah, it's Christmas. Christmas time is coming. Gift giving is coming. People are going to be buying stuff for somebody, and you're probably going to get something for your significant fisher person. And I'm going to go through a list of interesting items, things that I've recently seen at a couple of shows I've been to, as well as the magazines I read, and see if I can't put together an easy to select, if you will, or easy to buy fishing gear list for that favorite fisher person of yours. Thank you so much again for listening. Without listeners like y'all, I wouldn't have a podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend. You can reach me via email at catchoutdoors@gmail.com. All questions, suggestions for past, current, future podcast subjects are more than welcome. Catch Outdoors, hosted by Anchor and available via Spotify. Our Facebook page is Catch Outdoors. Our website is catchoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.